The chandeliers glittered like falling stars above the grand ballroom. White orchids lined the aisle. Crystal glasses caught the light. A harpist played softly in the corner while guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos whispered about stock prices and political connections. Outside, black luxury cars stretched down the driveway. Cameras flashed behind the gates. It was more than a wedding. It was a transaction. Daniel Carter adjusted the wrench in his hand and wiped sweat from his forehead. He didn't belong here. Not in this world of silk and champagne. He had been called in last minute. A refrigeration unit in the catering area had malfunctioned. The venue manager had sounded desperate. Big money wedding. No mistakes allowed. Daniel never turned down extra work. Especially not with Lily's school field trip payment due next week. His 7-year-old daughter sat cross-legged near the service entrance, quietly coloring in her notebook. She wore headphones too big for her head, humming softly to herself. Daniel glanced at her and smiled. She was the only reason he kept moving forward some days. 3 years ago, cancer had taken his wife in less than 6 months. Since then, life had become a series of small battles, bills, school lunches, grief that came in waves at night. He finished tightening the bolt and stood. That's when he heard it. A sound so raw it didn't belong in a place this polished. Crying. Not delicate sniffles. Not pre-wedding nerves. This was breaking. At first, he told himself to ignore it. Rich people problems weren't his business. But the sound didn't stop. It echoed down the quiet hallway that led to the bridal suites. Daniel hesitated, then walked toward it. The corridor was empty. Staff had cleared out for the ceremony. At the very end, one door stood slightly open. He knocked gently. Hello. No answer. He pushed the door a little wider. And froze. The bride stood before a full-length mirror, wrapped in a gown that looked like it belonged in a museum. Hand-stitched lace hugged her figure. Diamonds shimmered at her collarbone. A veil cascaded behind her like a waterfall of silk. But her hands were gripping the edge of the vanity as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her breathing was shallow. I can't do this, she whispered to herself. Daniel immediately stepped back. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. She turned. Their eyes met. For a moment, time slowed. She wasn't just beautiful. She was terrified. Are you with security? She asked, voice trembling. No. Maintenance. I heard. He trailed off. She laughed, but it wasn't humor. Of course. Maintenance. That's fitting. He started to retreat. I'll leave you to it. Wait. The word came out fragile. He paused. She looked at the closed door behind him, then back at him. They're waiting for me. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I figured. I'm supposed to walk down those stairs in 5 minutes. Her lips quivered. But I can't breathe. Daniel had seen panic attacks before. His wife used to get them during her treatments. He recognized the signs. Try sitting, he said gently. She obeyed without thinking, sinking onto the edge of a velvet chair. I thought I could handle it, she murmured. I've handled worse. Worse than marrying someone you don't want to. Her eyes shot up. How did you? You don't cry like that over someone you love. Silence filled the room. Then she whispered, it's a merger. He frowned. My father built an empire. Tech, real estate, energy. When he died, I took over. Her voice steadied slightly as she shifted into business mode. Our biggest competitor is Adrian's company. The board believes this marriage ensures stability. And what do you believe? Her composure cracked again. I believe I'm about to sign my life away. A knock slammed against the door. Victoria. A male voice, calm, authoritative. It's time. Her shoulders stiffened instantly. That's him, she whispered. The handle rattled slightly. Victoria, don't make this dramatic. Daniel felt something shift in the air. The control in that man's voice wasn't affection. It was ownership. She looked at Daniel, eyes wide. If I walk out there and say no, I lose control of my company. The board will side with him. I could lose everything. Daniel thought about the tiny apartment he shared with Lily. About nights when he'd sat on the bathroom floor after Lily was asleep, wondering how he'd keep everything together. He understood losing everything, but he also understood losing yourself. My wife died 3 years ago, he said quietly. Victoria blinked, surprised. For months before that, I kept telling her we'd fight. We'd win. That we couldn't give up. His jaw tightened slightly. But the last week, she told me she was tired. Not of life. Of fighting for something that was already gone. He looked at her carefully. She said sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop pretending. Another knock. Louder. You have 2 minutes, the voice outside warned. Victoria's breathing quickened. If I don't walk out there, this becomes a scandal. Investors panic. Stocks drop. Daniel shrugged. They recover. My reputation recovers. My future. That's the one you actually get to choose. She stared at him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If it's your life, you get to decide who stands next to you in it. Her eyes filled again. You make it sound simple. It is simple, he said softly. Not easy, but simple. The knocking turned into pounding. Victoria, open the door. Security voices echoed faintly behind it. She stood abruptly. Panic flashed across her face. Daniel glanced down the hallway. There's a service exit past the kitchen, he said quickly. Leads to the back lot. Her heart was racing so hard she could hear it in her ears. If I leave, she whispered, there's no going back. Daniel met her gaze. Then don't go back. For a split second, she hesitated. Then something in her expression changed. Resolve. She grabbed her train, lifted it, and ran. They burst into the kitchen. Staff gasped. A bridesmaid screamed. One of the groomsmen shouted, stop her. Daniel pushed through swinging doors and shoved open the metal exit. Sunlight hit her face like oxygen after drowning. His old pickup truck sat alone in the loading area. Lily looked up from the backseat. Daddy, get in, he said urgently. Victoria didn't question it. She climbed into the passenger seat, gown spilling everywhere. Daniel jumped in, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. Voices shouted behind them. Phones were already recording. He drove. They didn't speak for several minutes. Victoria stared straight ahead, hands trembling in her lap. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Adrian. Board members. Unknown numbers. News alerts. She turned it off. Lily leaned forward slightly. Are you a princess? She asked curiously. Victoria looked back at her. For the first time all day, a real smile appeared. I was, she said softly. But I think I just ran away from the castle. Daniel exhaled slowly. Who exactly did I just help escape? She looked at him fully. My name is Victoria Hale. The name hit him instantly. Even he knew it. CEO of Hale Industries. Billionaire. Media icon. He nearly laughed in disbelief. You've got to be kidding. She shook her head. He stared at the road ahead. So I just drove off with the most powerful woman in the city. You didn't drive off with me, she said quietly. You gave me a choice. Sirens echoed faintly somewhere behind them. Daniel tightened his grip on the wheel. Where do you want to go? Victoria looked out at the open road, veil fluttering slightly in the breeze from the cracked window. For the first time in her perfectly controlled life, she didn't have a plan. She looked back at him. Somewhere no one expects me. Daniel thought about the lakeside cabin 2 hours away. The one he hadn't visited since his wife passed. Maybe both of them needed a place to breathe. He nodded. I know somewhere. And as the city skyline disappeared in the rearview mirror, Victoria Hale realized something extraordinary. She hadn't just escaped a wedding. She had escaped a life that wasn't hers. And beside her sat a man who had nothing to gain, except the courage to tell her she deserved freedom. By the time they reached the highway, the world had already caught up. Daniel didn't know it yet. But every news station in the city was running the same headline. Billionaire bride disappears minutes before ceremony. Security footage showed it all. Victoria lifting her dress, running through the kitchen, and climbing into an old pickup truck. The truck's license plate was visible. Clear as day. Daniel's phone started ringing 10 minutes into the drive. Unknown number. He ignored it. Then it rang again. And again. Victoria's phone, powered off in her lap, felt heavier than stone. She knew what was happening without checking. Adrian would be furious. Not heartbroken. Not worried. Furious. Because she hadn't embarrassed him. She had challenged him. Lily hummed quietly in the backseat, unaware of the storm building behind them. Victoria glanced at the child through the rearview mirror. So, Lily said softly, are you staying with us? Victoria blinked. I don't know. Daniel finally answered his phone on the 5th call. Hello, Mr. Carter. A sharp voice asked. Yes, this is legal counsel representing Mr. Adrian Cole. Victoria's spine went rigid. Daniel's jaw tightened. You are currently in possession of Ms. Victoria Hale. Return her immediately. Daniel glanced at Victoria. She shook her head firmly. I'm not in possession of anyone, Daniel said evenly. She left on her own. She is under emotional distress. If you do not comply, you may face kidnapping charges. The word hung in the air. Kidnapping. Lily stopped humming. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. She is sitting right here, he replied calmly. And she can speak for herself. Victoria leaned toward the phone. I am not kidnapped, she said clearly. I made my own decision. Silence. Then the lawyer's tone sharpened. This decision has consequences, Ms. Hale. Victoria's voice turned cold, CEO cold. So does coercion. She ended the call. Daniel exhaled. Kidnapping, huh? Adrian doesn't lose, she said quietly. Not publicly. Well, Daniel muttered, eyes on the road, guess today's a first. But inside, fear was settling in. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for Lily. He had stepped into a war between titans. And he drove a 10-year-old truck. An hour later, they stopped at a small gas station outside the city. Victoria had removed her veil but still wore the wedding dress. People stared. Daniel handed Lily a juice box and gently pulled Victoria aside. Listen, he said quietly. You need to understand something. She looked at him. My life is small. It's simple. I don't have lawyers on speed dial. I don't have security teams. If this turns into something ugly. He didn't finish. She understood. I never meant to drag you into this. You didn't, he said firmly. I walked into it. Her eyes softened. For what it's worth, she said, I don't regret it. He held her gaze a second longer than he should have. Then looked away first. When they got back on the road, Daniel took a smaller route toward the lake cabin. His late wife had loved that place. It sat hidden between tall pines, far from cameras and city noise. He hadn't visited in years. Grief had kept him away. Maybe today, they both needed somewhere that didn't belong to the world. Meanwhile, the world was exploding. Financial analysts were already speculating live on television. If this wedding collapses, the Hale-Cole merger could destabilize tech markets. Stock prices are fluctuating rapidly. Sources close to the Cole family claim Victoria Hale is experiencing emotional instability. That last one spread fastest. Emotionally unstable. A woman who runs a billion-dollar empire. Reduced to hysteria within an hour. Victoria didn't see it yet. But she knew Adrian well enough to predict his next move. He wouldn't chase her personally. He would attack her credibility. They reached the cabin just before sunset. The lake shimmered gold. The air smelled like pine and stillness. Daniel stepped out first and looked around carefully. No cars. No drones. Just quiet. Victoria stepped out slowly. The hem of her wedding dress brushed against gravel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. This is beautiful, she whispered. It used to be hers, Daniel said softly. He didn't have to explain who. Victoria understood. Inside, the cabin was simple. Wooden floors. Old couch. Small fireplace. Dust in the corners. Lily ran to the window. Daddy, there's a dock. Daniel smiled faintly. Tomorrow, he said. Victoria stood in the middle of the room, suddenly aware of the absurdity of her appearance. I look ridiculous. Daniel let out the smallest laugh. Yeah, he admitted. A little. She surprised him by laughing too. It was the first real, unguarded sound of joy he'd heard from her. Later that night, after Lily fell asleep on the couch, Victoria sat on the small porch steps. The wedding dress pulled around her like the remains of another life. Daniel stepped outside, handing her a worn hoodie. She slipped it on without protest. They sat in silence, listening to the lake water lap against the dock. They're going to come after you, she said finally. I figured. Adrian will try to scare you. He already did. She turned toward him. Why did you help me? It wasn't accusation. It was curiosity. Daniel stared out at the dark water. Because no one helped my wife when she felt trapped in fear, he said quietly. Everyone told her to be strong. To keep fighting. But no one asked if she wanted something different. Victoria swallowed. And I looked like her. No, he said. You looked like someone about to disappear. The words settled between them. Something fragile and powerful at the same time. Inside, Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a lawyer. It was a local news alert. He opened it. His stomach dropped. There was a photo of him. Taken from security footage. Headline: Mystery man identified in bride's disappearance. His full name. His workplace. Even mention of his daughter. Victoria saw his face pale. What is it? He handed her the phone. Her expression darkened instantly. Adrian had escalated. This is intimidation, she said quietly. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. They dragged Lily into it. Victoria stood up. And something changed. The softness from earlier hardened into steel. They made a mistake. He looked at her. That's the difference between you and Adrian, she continued. He thinks power is about control. And you. She met his eyes directly. I think it's about protection. For the first time since leaving the wedding, Daniel realized something important. He hadn't rescued a helpless woman. He had helped unleash one. And whoever thought she ran away in fear had no idea she was about to fight back.